All right, welcome everyone to our club, My Life, My Business. And our event really is about engagement, and that's why we entitled it Wish I Was Here. So, this afternoon, we're going to be continuing with our conversation around leadership. And Shanaz is going to share with us this afternoon. I'm really excited to hear what she is going to be delivering. So, Shanaz, a special welcome to you, and over to you.
Hi, Jacques. Thank you for having me. Yeah, strangely enough, was looking forward to the discussion as well because I realized I hadn't looked at some of my work and things that I've done around developing my leadership style for quite some time. So it was a really good refresher for me to go over some documents and things that I'd written sort of when I did a course. Yeah. So firstly, I think last week you were chatting about your leadership style and kind of where it started. So I think that I was quite late in my leadership, in becoming a leader. It was sort of, or maybe it wasn't that late. It was in high school, and I think my first leadership role was youth leader at our church. So that was sort of the first time that I was leader, and I think that my leadership was has always been inspired by my mother, and has been she's played quite an important role in my leadership style. I think some positives and some some negatives there. I think that so in terms of her style, she was very much a woman of color, and in leadership positions. She was the first woman of color to hold a management position at Woolworths, the first woman of color to be a national manager for Hertz car rental she used to work at. So there was a lot of first as a woman of color for her, and she was also involved in politics. And I think that that thing instilled in me the sense of social justice that I was always, I think, going to have in terms of my leadership style. And so I was really privileged to be able to, when I lived in the UK, to be able to attend a and do a postgraduate course as well as seminars on Black leadership in organizations. And in fact, it was called Black leadership in white organizations. And I found that really fascinating. And even when I was looking at some of the work, I was always wanting to come and implement some of the work there. So, firstly, the course itself was at the Tavistock Institute, which is like a global institute for psychoanalytic studies, but also for organizational management. And I remember the two leaders on the course, they were like, oh my word, this is like it was like a problem even to be able to have a group of people of color sitting together, where they excluded white people, was problematic. Like they had to really fight for it. And then it made us question what is so dangerous when people of color or when leaders of color get together to discuss issues that are related to them. And I think that that theme has kind of remained and I think in different spaces. So I think that what then actually happened was that when my other leadership sort of roles that I then started to play as I got into high school and then went on to varsity was student rep for my class, and I think I briefly did a stint on the faculty SRC, and I think that those roles and going into social work has very much been at the forefront of the style of leadership that I was involved in. So I think automatically I sort of evolved into doing this course in the UK, entitled Black Leadership in White Organizations. And so what they also decided was that when you understand leadership, Stephen, like, I mean, going back to the work of Stephen Covey, he says that doing leadership involves doing the right things, and management involves doing things right. And I thought that that's quite important for me as a woman of color. And I remember my mom also as a woman of color. And you know what, for women, particularly, I think, is that you can deny, in any context, you can deny your race or your identity. But for me, and the reality is that when you go into any organization as a leader, your who you are, your background is always going to be important. You can deny that part of yourself, but you will the situation will find you. So even if you wanted to kind of get out of it and deny that aspect, or say that your race or your color doesn't matter, no matter where you go in the world, it will matter. And I think that I had to learn that as well. And I think that that's what I'd like to inspire in some of the students that I mentor, and the work that I do, is that we can try to put race and our background on the back burner. But it's so, when you think of leadership, it's so much about who you are also, and that includes your identity then. And so the other thing, that what I said when I wrote a little paper, an assignment we had to do, and I said that black leadership is more than just leadership also. It actually, for me, it involves challenging injustice, and it also involves having a vision and then the commitment to influence others. And I said that it also, for me, then, as a woman, as I became aware of what it means to be a woman in leadership, I realized that my gender does play a role even when I don't want it to play a role. And so for me, then, as a woman of color, it also then means to be a black woman of color in any organization is about developing processes and strategies that is going to help you survive then and transcend some of the challenges that you experience in organizations. And I mean, some of the challenges that I experience, and I know immediately, I think not only of myself but my mom, is the fact that some of the spaces that I encountered is that it's male dominated. Whether this is in church leadership, whether this is in organizational leadership, and it's becoming less so in academic spaces. Thankfully, in academic spaces, there are lots more women than was previously there before. But so what are the challenges do we as women sometimes feel? So some of the challenges that I experienced, and particularly as a woman of color, is that I need to prove myself. Not only do I need to prove myself that that I can do the job, I can do that. As a woman, I can do the job, but also as a woman of color, I can do the job. And so what, and that in itself can place a tremendous pressure on you, because what then happens is that I want to over excel. I want to be the achiever, overachiever. And you know what then starts to happen? In that process of needing to prove myself, I take on and have taken on too many issues, too many tasks and responsibilities that was not mine to take on, but the organization's responsibility or other people's responsibility. What then happens when we do that is that we burn out and we want to change jobs quickly. And very interestingly, there are many, what they found of black female leaders, and even Black leaders is that there's a lot of job changing in a quick space of time. And that's because of our experiences often don't get recognized. Our experiences regarding our own background, our experiences regarding microaggressions of racism, but also the other burden that I've experienced when I'm being a woman of color in a leadership position is that people within my same community, or I regard myself as black, not white, so who then assume and want me to take on this mothering role for them, or want me have expectations that I'm like their family member, and then what need me to do favors which I'm not always comfortable with, or I feel obligated towards that whole concept of we needing to pay it forward. And absolutely I need to pay it forward, but I can't do it with everything and with everyone. And so I think that as a black female leader, I often find that in my experiences with other female leaders, we tend to burn out quite soon. And so that's a concern for me then. And that is where I think the idea of finding ways in which I need to survive an organization is important. So what I thought I wanted to kind of also add to this is, so if we are then just surviving, I did this little course on surviving or thriving as a black woman, and it was interesting to note that one of the some of the things that they say, when you know you are thriving in your position as a woman of color, is when you're able to say no without feeling guilty, when you also have external support, and you have ideas of sort of working towards overcoming obstacles and struggles. And I want to just kind of briefly stop on the external support. Um, Often in organizations, regardless of whether it's corporate or whether it's academic, in which I find myself in, um, there is limited support available for women of color or black women, because it's not our issues and our concerns, the real reality of being a woman of color in a corporate organization is not always realized. Often, as a woman of color, you are highly visible but extremely invisible at the same time. And I think that we challenge, as women, we challenge difference. And it just by I don't even have to open my mouth. I can just come into a room or a boardroom or a meeting and be the only female of color with, say, among men, and immediately I change the conversation, or I change the dynamic in the room without even saying a word. And so I think that I mean, my big desire is to kind of put some of these issues on the table when I have the right kind of space to do it. But then what? So I'm aware of the time as well, and I know that Jacques, you can interrupt me, but I just before you kind of interrupt me. So I wrote a little piece on my identity, which I kind of, when I was in the UK, and I think it's still relevant for us, as if you want to use the term mixed heritage, whatever term how you want to define yourself. And so in the UK, I was defined as dual heritage, meaning like mixed race, or I have multiple ethnicities in me. And so I said that what is really important, I discovered about my dual heritage, and this is very still relevant for me today, is that when I started to understand how fluid my identity was, I was then able to explore my own differences. So even in my interview with UCT, I had a panel of interviews, and they were asking me about how am I going to manage issues of racism when I very much know my identity as a woman of color. There's lots of racism and prejudice that my own community has about black people and black students, and I needed to address that. I had to be comfortable with that, and so I had to explore my own prejudices, my own differences. um, and so I think it's important that as leaders we do have the space to explore our own prejudices and our own differences. But what it does then is when you are able to become comfortable and you embrace the challenge, the uncomfortableness of dealing with my mixed heritage, what then happens is I have an opportunity to explore differences within an all black group, or a group of women of color, for example. If we as I said, an all black leaders. Now, what do we face in our own community? What do we face? We do face issues of difference like class. We do face issues of shadism, where my granny used to tell me to come out of the sun because I was her darkest grandchild. And so, she didn't want me to get any darker. And so we need to confront some of that, because when we look at where celebrities are going, skin lightening creams and all of that, so it very much affects us how we are today. We can talk about hair. They talk about the politics of black hair. We can also talk about gender, which is such an important issue. But if we are not willing to engage with our own identity and explore our own differences, as women of color, and particularly of dual heritage, if we don't engage with that, then we can't also engage. Sorry, we can't also engage then with the advantage that we bring. So, what advantage do I bring when I go into any group, whether it's a group of all males, whether it's a group of all white men, or all white group, or all Americans? Immediately, as when I understand my identity and I know who I am and my purpose, then as a leader, as a black female leader, then I am able to comfortably engage in the topic, and also stay true to who I am. And that also goes to when I am in an all black group. And so this has happened where I can bring up issues of class and gender. And I make a difference just by my presence when I own who I am. And so for me, that means that as women of color, we can make such a big difference when we are leaders. But I find that maybe too many women of color, we shrink back because of the issues that I've mentioned, but also we haven't started to understand, and not only women of color, I think men too, we haven't started to understand and engage in the topic of gender, race, and class. We maybe as South Africans, we know that we want to put those things, we want to forget it and move forward, but the reality is that when I go for an interview, or when I engage with another organization, often I find that I am faced with a white male, or I am faced with a male. And so how do I engage as a woman? So the joke was that I am in a relationship, and then I went for an interview a couple of years ago, and my partner said to me, you can't wear a trouser because women the men don't like it when women go to the interview and wear a trouser. So they like it to wear a skirt. So yes, so that is basically me, Jacques. So you can, yeah. So so regardless of, I'm going to be confronted with these issues, and so I think it's important that we start to think of this as Black female leaders. Thank you. Any questions from your side? You can go ahead or comment.
Sure, Shanaz, quite a perspective, but also, this to me just, highlights, what resonates for me is when you said that women basically, burn out so much faster in an organization because they have to prove themselves, do double the work, and so we're aware of this. But the added pressure as not just a woman, but also a woman of color, as you name it, then reduces or shortens the longevity in a way. And then, when you use the word survive, I'm thinking to myself, so, we've been talking about enjoying what you are doing. Um, make your everyday count. So there immediately for me lies the challenge. And then you said you did a workshop on surviving the organization rather than thriving in the organization. So the different. So I'm thinking to myself. So how do you begin to enjoy your journey as a woman of color? And you start off by saying, you know what? Say no without being feeling guilty. So I wanted to start with my question really around that one is how is this possible? This is one of the simplest things in terms of boundary management as a leader is being able to say no with confidence. You tie this into as a woman and a woman of color, you've got to prove that you've earned that position of of authority and power, and so you work extremely hard to do so, and therefore accept things that come your way as a challenge to further say, well, throw everything at me, I'm able to cope, and by the way, I'll do it better than anyone else in that manner. So my first question is sort of off color question, but we always say, I find myself sitting with leaders, and this comes up many times, is how to say no. And I'm talking about senior executives, actually across the board. Hey, so but now more especially as a woman or as a black woman, how do you say no? Isn't it rather it's easier said than done? What are your thoughts?
Hi, absolutely. It's much it's easier said than done. So I do have to spend time thinking about the request. And does this fit with where I am right now? Do I have the capacity to do it? And I've got a situation that I am having to negotiate in my head and I'm needing to say no to. And like currently, and I'm like, do I have the space now? What is it? How does this fit in with my purpose? How does this fit in with my goals right now? And so it does mean really sitting with it. And when I'm going to, oh, it means compromising and saying, I can't do it then, and I can't do it for free because it's work. So this is what I'm willing to do. I'm willing to do it, which I'm possibly going to say, I'm willing to do a seminar of 2 hours for you with to the organizations without paying. But if you want me to do a day's training with the amount of work, you're going to have to pay for it. So, and this is for a colleague, a mentee of mine wanting me to do something for her, and she works in government. She's like got a big post. So I'm like, okay, do I need to be nice to the powers that be and keep the door open for me, or do I need to look at where I am emotionally right now and how much capacity I have? So that I don't burn out. So the
Yes.
answer is it's not easy. You need to negotiate. I need to understand my purpose and my goals. And when I understand how this fits into my purpose, if it does not fit into my purpose, I am going to say no.
Okay. All right, that is extremely practical. But what do you say to a woman who says, well, Shanaz, is actually easy for you to say it doesn't fit in your purpose. What if you don't really know what your purpose is? All you thinking about in corporate, in that kind of an organization is, well, I've earned my place in my role, and my role and my purpose seem to be combined. So if I say no in this role, isn't that against my purpose, even though I've run out of capacity, actually?
What I've tried to tell someone in a similar situation was that she really does need to consider. I say that, like, decide, do you want to win the war or do you want to win this particular battle? Because a war consists of several battles, and we don't have to win each and every one of them in order to win the war ultimately. So,
Okay.
so what I would tell her is, okay, you can say yes to this one, but I'd really like you to think about the next two offers that you're going to get, and maybe you need to change that then if you want to say yes to this.
So it's actually a bit of a trade-off, or have filters in your head in the way you approach things, and say, well, okay, these top three things, that could be principles or values, should be met for me in order for me to say yes. If they don't, say no, because that flows out of, even if it's I think it's self-explanatory in a way. If you say, well, I understand my purpose, this is beyond my purpose in your context. But if you're sitting in a work situation where you've
Yeah,
run out of capacity, and what you're saying is, it's tied to that saying no without feeling guilty, because that feeling that sits there, and begins to basically eat at you, which next time around when you're asked to do it, you then go overboard and you do even more, because the last time you felt so guilty. So it's, that principle of
yeah,
self leadership.
yeah,
Saying no to me is
yeah.
self leadership, being
I
able.
will also look at the worth, you see, because for me, when I spend more time and I know the person, then I also understand, and as per someone working with them or as a mentor, then I'd be trying to ask them about what do they understand about their worth, because what I'm hearing here is that maybe someone who's feeling like they need to prove their worth, and so I'd start to explore that with him.
Yes, absolutely. So, that area of self-worth, it spills over into, is my time valuable? Do I regard my time as valuable? Because you can sometimes see, if 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 you do something and you need to bill, you have to ask a fee. Sometimes you don't ask too much also, and there is something about the fee structures and how certain genders apply that, with the confidence. There's some studies around this area. I haven't delved too much into it, but it's interesting that you could have this dynamic take place. But yes, absolutely self worth. Um, that is key, and it feeds itself into something that you said that was so profound. Is that you were talking about being of dual heritage. It's nice. It's a nice phrase. I'm going to steal that one. Um, and but if you have this cocktail of different ethnicities, and not to take that as feeling less than, but if you embrace who you are, love who you are in your own skin, that's what unlocks the value that you add in any team. And I thought that was very, very significant. If you want to make a difference, accept yourself, love yourself, know that you can add value, especially when you do so. Because your perspective of life is so unique in a certain way, and it always adds value. I always think about, when one thinks about a diamond and the brilliance of a diamond is multifaceted, literally the different planes that's polished in different ways, and light in it, and it refracts and reflects light in different ways because of the the facets that it has. Now, brilliance brings, or multifaceted thinking and contributions brings brilliance. So if you know that you are, and specifically if you are a woman, number one, big plus, but especially a woman of color, your potential to bring brilliance to every single scenario, every single meeting, every single team, and loving that. You said that being both highly visible on the outside, when you walk into a room, as harnessing all of that and then becoming invisible because not necessarily value and worth could be associated with this skin deep visibility, but you yourself embracing the who you are, not different, but everything else that's in you, and being that confident. And I know I'm not talking about arrogance, but being that confident, knowing that because of all of this, you add value wherever you are. So the everybody recognizing, stopping talking because you've entered the room, fantastic, because use that as a reminder that, wow, you are about to add some incredible value to this agenda, whatever it might be, whether it's a normal meeting, board meeting, or workshop. And I thought, as a highlight for me, that resonates with me very strongly today, Shanaz.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, and it was a pleasure for me to kind of contribute, and yeah, I'll need to. You've stirred up my my motivation and inspiration to do some things in leadership again, and maybe yeah, I don't know. I will explore that options around training. So yeah, thank you.
It's been absolutely wonderful. And I think, are you ready to contribute regularly from now on?
Yes, I am willing to do that. You can, I feel, yeah, you can let me know.
I
I
will
am
let you know
willing.
for sure.
Okay, great. Thanks.
But just a great big thank you for sharing in the way you did. And I know that the people listening in today, but also the podcast, is going to be of immense value. So thank you, Shanaz.
So, thank you. Bye.